This is the 2013 trash can Mac Pro. And what's it like using all these years later? Is it still worth it? Let's find out. Indeed, this is a Mac Pro, believe it or not, and has widely been given the nickname the Trash Can Mac Pro for obvious reasons. And first impressions really give off the design as something you would crumple up and discard your failed dreams in. I mean, as goofy looking as it is, it really impresses me how incredibly engineered its design is from the inside out. Quite literally, because the reflection from the polished aluminum makes it impossible for me to record B-roll for this thing without the camera or me showing up in the reflection. But anyways, I bought this unit on eBay for the low price of just $200, which I would consider a hell of a deal for what came included. A 6-core Xeon CPU, 16 gigs of RAM, a 500GB SSD, and dual AMD FirePro D500 GPUs with 3 gigs each. Like what? I get that this is older hardware, but on paper, these specs still make for a decent desktop, an Apple one at that. So, it really begs the question, why is it so cheap? That's something I'll explain later because there's a major reason as to why. But I think we should look at the positives first. To start, I think it's a cool looking desktop. It's sleek, modern looking, and comes with a variety of ports. Before we get into the technical stuff, I think we should take a look at how the computer actually performs. Running Geekbench will give us a good look at what kind of performance we are getting. Here's what we get for the CPU single-core and multi-core scores. Around what I would expect, and really shows the CPU's age, considering the M1 chip in the Mac Mini scored higher in single-core than this thing did in multi-core. And here's how the dual GPUs perform. Honestly, not too shabby. I mean, it's nothing special these days, but still relatively holds up for what it's worth. Here's how it compares to the M1 chip and even my 16-inch Intel MacBook with Radeon 5300M graphics. Moving on to Unigine Valley, set at the medium graphics setting, the performance is honestly not great. Again, to be expected. Although I will give it an exception considering it ran at the monitor's native resolution, 3440 by 1440, with only one of the GPUs being utilized, which honestly makes sense. I'm sure if both GPUs were being utilized, the performance would be a bit different. While this is a desktop not intended to run games, Minecraft runs pretty well around 70 to 100 FPS without any performance enhancing mods, which is definitely very playable. Taking a look at the hardware, such as the I/O, it comes with 4 USB 3.0 ports, 6 Thunderbolt 3 ports, audio and microphone port, and HDMI 1.4. This Mac natively supports up to macOS Monterey and can be made possible to run the latest macOS if you're willing to use patch tools to do so. Specs wise, the specific machine has these specs. I'll list them on the screen so I don't have to repeat myself from earlier, but otherwise, upgradability on this machine is pretty decent as well. All it really takes to get inside the thing is switching this switch from lock to unlock and sliding this thing up. And now you have access to everything inside, such as the storage, RAM, GPUs, and CPU, which is a little complicated to get to. The 2013 Mac Pro uses ECC memory considering it is a workstation, and at a max rate of 1866 megatransfers per second, say at 16 gigs, and supports up to 128 gigabytes at 1066 megatransfers per second. A 12-core Xeon E5 2697 V2 CPU, and dual AMD FirePro D700 GPUs. And while we are in here, we can also see how everything stays cool too. There is a single fan at the top of the Mac Pro that acts as an exhaust fan that sucks the air through these vents at the bottom and funnels the air through the system where it gets exhausted at the top. It's not the most efficient, or should I say effective way to keep a bunch of power-hungry components cool, but it seems it was the only option with this design. As a matter of fact, I just so happen to have 32 gigs of DDR3 ECC RAM lying around, don't ask why, and I'm curious to see if this computer will take the upgrade. It's 1600 megatransfers per second, but I don't see why it shouldn't work. So let's take out the old RAM and add the new sticks. Let's put the cover back on and try it out. So yeah, it actually recognizes the slower RAM, which is awesome, and now I have double the RAM. Nice. Now I'm one step closer to having a true professional desktop. Well, I wish that was the case. And that brings me on to the downsides about owning one of these desktops.
Don't get me wrong, like I said, the design of these Macs is like a piece of art. And the amount of engineering and time it took to achieve something like this is practically amazing.
But the problem came down to who Apple was marketing this to. Obviously professionals, I mean, it's in the name after all, but they completely missed the mark on the pro aspect of this desktop. For context, the Power Mac G5 all the way back in 2003 was aimed at professionals because it was built around the aspect of upgradability and, keyword, expansion. You could put your own graphics cards, 3.5-inch hard drives, and other PCI cards that were necessary to one's workflow. And it remained the same principle as it evolved into the Intel Mac Pro in 2006 all the way up to 2012. Sure, the 2013 Mac Pro has upgradability to an extent, but that's it. There's no expansion outside what's already in its form factor. Not to mention how insufficient the cooling in this computer is. Long work sessions, whether CPU or GPU intensive tasks, could lead to overheating and thermal throttling due to the single fan in its system. It's no wonder why Apple went back to the once known cheese grater design back in 2019, because, well, you know why, and I guess that concludes the review for this thing. So after discussing the pros and cons for this Mac Pro, I've gotta say, it's held up pretty well 11 years later and have dropped down to a reasonably well price range. Whether the utterly horrible depreciation for these devices is a good thing, that's for you to decide. Right now, I think $200 is a good price for this specific spec, which is pretty reasonable to find, and if you plan to do a few upgrades, I wouldn't put any more than $400 into the entire cost of the computer, because, well, you can find good Apple Silicon Mac Minis for only a couple hundred more.
But anyways, thanks for watching. If you like what you saw, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing. I'll see y'all in the next video.